Hello and welcome to Mahatma Gandhi Letters. Dear friends, do you know Indian voters in whole Natal province were 250? You may think that such a movement was only for the rights of only a small number of people. But Gandhi thought taking away the right to vote was the beginning of the end for Indians. That's not all. There were even more serious forms of exploitation. During those days, in Natal province, there were 4 lakhs African inhabitants, 50,000 Europeans, and 50,000 Indians. Indentured Indian immigration drew after it thousands of free Indians who came as hawkers, tradesmen, artisans, and members of the professions like Gandhi. They numbered perhaps around 50,000. The peddlers carried their wares on their backs hundreds of miles into Zulu villages where no white man would try to do business. Gradually, many of them acquired riches and property. Indians even owned steamship lines. The result, in 1894, 250 free Indians in Natal, being subjects of Her British Majesty, Queen Victoria, and having met the wealth qualification, enjoyed the right to vote. But that year, the Natal legislature passed a law explicitly disfranchising Asiatics. That was not all. Throughout Natal, an Indian had to carry a pass to be in the streets after 9 p.m. Persons without passes were arrested. The Orange Free State, a Boer republic, forbade Indians to own property, to trade, or to farm. In the Crown Colony of Zululand, Indians were not allowed to own or buy land. The same prescription applied in the Transvaal, where, moreover, Indians had to pay a £3 fee for the right to reside. But residence was restricted to slums. In the Cape Colony, some municipalities prohibited Indians from walking on footpaths. Elsewhere, Indians avoided footpaths and pavements because they might be kicked off. Gandhi himself was once so kicked. Indians in South Africa were legally barred from buying South African gold. They were described in statute books as semi-barbarous Asiatics. In these years in South Africa, Gandhi had become a prosperous lawyer and the outstanding Indian political figure. He was widely known as the champion of indentured laborers. He addressed conferences, drafted memorials to government ministers, wrote letters to newspapers, circulated petitions, and made many friends among whites, Indians, and native Africans. He learned a few Zulu words and found the language very sweet. He also achieved some knowledge of Tamil. He published 2 pamphlets, An Appeal to Every Briton in South Africa and the Indian Franchise, An Appeal. Appeal was the key to Gandhi's politics. He appealed to the common sense and morality of his adversary. It has always been a mystery to me, he says in his autobiography, how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings. This was the essence of Gandhi's appeal. Friends, in today's episode, we are reading lengthiest article so far. In fact, it was booklet, which is distributed all over Natal province. The pamphlet says, it was printed in Natal Mercury Steam Printing Works, Durban. This document marks one of the Gandhi's first step towards his philosophy of nonviolent resistance. This was an article that no one can ignore. Since this was circulated among Europeans in Natal on December 1894, it must have been written before that date. Dear listeners, we are reading this article called Open Letter in 3 episodes, since it a lengthy reading. So friends, the article called Open Letter goes like this. Durban, December 1894. 2. The Honorable Members of the Honorable the Legislative Council and the Honorable the Legislative Assembly. Sir, were it possible to write to you anonymously, nothing would have been more pleasing to me. But the statements I shall have to make in this letter will be so grave and important that it would be considered a sheer act of cowardice not to disclose my name. I beg, however, to assure you that I write not from selfish motives, nor yet from those of self-aggrandizement or of seeking notoriety. The one and only object is to serve India, which is by accident of birth called my native country, and to bring about a better understanding between the European section of the community and the Indian in this colony. The only way this can be done is to appeal to those who represent and, at the same time, mold public opinion. Hence, If the Europeans and the Indians live in a perpetual state of quarrel, the blame would lie on your shoulders. If both can walk together and live together quietly and without friction, you will receive all the credit. It needs no proof that masses throughout the world follow, to a very great extent, the opinions of the leaders. Gladstone's opinions are the opinions of half England, and Salisbury's are those of the other half. A Burns thought for the strikers during the dock laborers' strike. Parnell thought for almost the whole of Ireland. The scriptures, all the scriptures of the world, say so. Says the Song Celestial, Bhagavad Gita by Edwin Arnold. What the wise choose, the unwise people take. What the best men do, the multitude will follow. This letter, therefore, needs no apology. It would hardly be called impertinent. For, to whom else could such an appeal be more aptly made, or by whom else should it be considered more seriously than you? To carry on an agitation in England is but a poor relief when it can only create a greater friction between the two peoples in the colony. The relief, at best, could only be temporary. Unless the Europeans in the colony can be induced to accord the Indians a better treatment, the Indians have a very bad time before them, under the aegis of the responsible government, in spite of the vigilance of the home government. If that hatred is simply based upon his color, then of course he has no hope. The sooner he leaves the colony, the better. No matter what he does, he will never have the white skin. If, however, it is based upon something else, if it is based upon an ignorance of his general character and attainments, he may hope to receive his due at the hands of the Europeans in the colony. The question what use the colony will make of the 40,000 Indians is, I submit, worthy of the most serious consideration by the colonists, and especially those who have the reins of government in their hands, who have been entrusted by the people with legislative powers. To root out the 40,000 Indians from the colony seems, without doubt, an impossible task. Most of them have settled here with their families. No legislation that could be permissible in a British colony would enable the legislators to drive these men out. It may be possible to devise a scheme to effectively check any further Indian immigration. But apart from that, the question suggested by me is, I submit, sufficiently serious to warrant my encroaching upon your attention and requesting you to peruse this letter without any bias. It is for you to say whether you will lower them or raise them in the scale of civilization, whether you will bring them down to a level lower than what they should occupy on account of heredity, whether you will alienate their hearts from you, or whether you will draw them closer to you, whether, in short, you would govern them despotically or sympathetically. You can educate public opinion in such a way that the hatred will be increased day by day, and you can, if you chose so to do, educate it in such a way that the hatred would begin to subside. I now propose to discuss the question under the following heads. 1. Are the Indians desirable as citizens in the colony? 2. What are they? 3. Is their present treatment in accordance with the best British traditions, or with the principles of justice and morality, or with the principles of Christianity? 4. From a purely material and selfish point of view, will an abrupt or gradual withdrawal of them from the colony result in substantial, lasting benefit to the colony? In discussing the first question, I will deal, first of all, with the Indians employed as laborers, most of whom have come to the colony under indenture. It seems to have been acknowledged by those who are supposed to know that the indentured Indians are indispensable for the welfare of the colony, whether as menials or waiters, whether as railway servants or gardeners. They are a useful addition to the colony. The work that a native cannot or would not do is cheerfully and well done by the indentured Indian. It would seem that the Indian has helped to make this the garden colony of South Africa. Withdraw the Indian from the sugar estate, and where would the main industry of the colony be? Nor can it be said that the work can be done by the native in the near future. The South African Republic is an instance in point. In spite of its so-called vigorous native policy, it remains practically a desert of dust, although the soil is very fruitful. the problem how to secure cheap labor for the mines there has been daily growing serious. The only garden worthy of the name is that on the Nelmapius estate, and does it not owe its success entirely to the Indian labor? One of the election addresses says, "And at the last, as the only thing to be done, the immigration of Indians was entered upon, and the legislature very wisely rendered their support and help in furthering this all-important scheme. At the time it was entered upon, the progress and almost the existence of the colony hung in the balance. And now what is the result of this scheme of immigration? Financially, £10,000 has been advanced yearly out of the treasury of the colony. With what result? Just this, that no vote ever made of money to develop the industries of the colony or to promote its interest in any way in this colony has yielded such a financially profitable return as that shown by the introduction of coolies as laborers into this colony. I believe the Durban population of Europeans, had no such labor been supplied as required for colonial industries, would be less by at least half what it is today, and 5 workmen only would be required where 20 now have employment. Property in Durban generally would have remained at a value some 300 or 400% below that which now obtains, and the lands in the colony and other towns in proportion according to the value of property in Durban and coastland would never have realized what it now sells at. This gentleman, quoted above, is no other than Mr. Garland. In spite of such invaluable help derived from the coolie, as the poor Indian is contemptuously termed even by those who ought to know better, the honorable gentleman goes on, ungratefully, to regret the tendency of the Indian to settle in the colony. I take the following extract from Mr. Johnston's article in the New Review, quoted in the Natal Mercury of the 11th August 1894. One seeks the solution in the introduction of a yellow race, able to stand a tropical climate and intelligent enough to undertake those special avocations which in temperate climates would be filled by Europeans. The yellow race, most successful hitherto in Eastern Africa, is the native of Hindustan. That race in divers types and divers religions, which, under British or Portuguese aegis, has created and developed the commerce of the East African littoral. The immigration of the docile, kindly, thrifty, industrious, clever-fingered, sharp-witted Indian into Central Africa will furnish us with the solid core of our armed forces in that continent, and will supply us with the telegraph clerks, the petty shopkeepers, the skilled artisans, the cooks, the minor employees, the clerks, and the railway officials needed in the civilized administration of tropical Africa. The Indian, liked by both black and white, will serve as a link between these two divergent races. As to the Indian traders, who are miscalled Arabs, it would appear best to consider the objections raised to their coming to the colony. From the papers, especially the Natal Mercury of 6/794, and the Natal Advertiser of 15/993, the objections appear to be that they are successful traders, and that, their mode of living being very simple, they compete with the European trader in petty trades. I dismiss as unworthy of consideration the generalizations from rare particular instances that the Indians resort to sharp practices. As to the particular instances of insolvency, I would only say, without meaning in the least to defend them, let those that arc without sin first cast a stone. Please examine the records of the insolvency court. Coming to the serious objection as to successful competition, I believe it is true. But is that a reason for driving them out of the colony? Will such a method commend itself to a body of civilized men? What is it that makes them so successful competitors? He who runs may see that it is nothing but their habits, which are extremely simple, though not barbarous, as the Natal Advertiser would have it. The chiefest element of their success, in my humble opinion, is their total abstinence from drink and its attendant evils. That habit at once causes an enormous saving of money. Moreover, their tastes are simple, and they are satisfied with comparatively small profits because they do not keep uselessly large establishments. In short, they earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. It is difficult to see how these facts can be urged as an objection to their stopping in the colony. Of course, they do not gamble, as a rule do not smoke, and can put up with little inconveniences. work more than 8 hours a day. Should they be expected to? Is it desirable that they should abandon these virtues and contract the terrible vices under which the Western nations are groaning, so that they may be permitted to live in the colony without molestation? It will be best, also, to consider the common objection to the Indian traders and laborers. It is their insanitary habits. I am afraid I must, to my great mortification, admit this charge partially. While much that is said against their insanitary habits proceeds merely out of spite and hatred, there is no denying that in this respect they are not everything that could be desired. That, however, never can be a reason for their expulsion from the colony. They are not hopelessly beyond reform in this branch. A strict, yet just and merciful operation of the sanitary law can, I submit, effectually cope with the evil and even eradicate it. Nor is the evil so great as to require already drastic measures. Their personal habits, it would appear, are not dirty, except in the case of the indentured Indians, who are too poor to attend to personal cleanliness. I may be allowed to say, from personal experience, that the trading community are compelled by their religion to bathe once a week at least, and have to perform ablutions, i.e., wash their faces and hands up to the elbows and their feet, every time they offer prayers. They are supposed to offer prayers 4 times a day, and there are very few who fail to do so at least twice a day. It will, I hope, be readily admitted that they are exceptionally free from those vices which render a community a danger to society. They yield to no one in their obedience to constitutional authority. They are never a political danger. And except the ruffians who are sometimes picked out, of course unknowingly, by the immigration agents at Calcutta and Madras, they seem to be free from the highly grievous offenses. I regret that my inability to compare the criminal court statistics prevents me from making any further observations on this point. I will, however, beg leave to quote from the Natal Almanac. It must be said for the Indian population that it is on the whole orderly and law-abiding. I submit that the above facts show that the Indian laborers are not only desirable but useful citizens of the colony, and also absolutely essential to its well-being, and that the traders have nothing in them that should render them undesirable in the colony. As to these latter, before quitting the subject, I would further add that they are a veritable blessing to the poor portion of the European community, insofar as by their keen competition they keep down the prices of necessities of life, and knowing their language and understanding their customs are indispensable to the Indian laborers, whose wants they study and supply, and whom they can deal with on better terms than the Europeans. Dear listeners, first part of the article, Open Letter, written by M.K. Gandhi. In next episode, we will continue with the second part of the same article. Thank you for listening to Mahatma Gandhi Letters.